Oh, here we are. So people say to me, in lockdown, what are you doing? You must be bored to tears, no scrutiny to go to. Well, I'm absolutely delighted to say I'm doing archaeology in my little flat. I'm digging through files which I just wouldn't otherwise have the time to look at. Now look at this. This is an original document. 1690. Original government documents from the United Kingdom. Privy Council. They used to meet in, where was this one? The court at Whitehall. This is it. This is the actual document. All these, look, these are the people who used to run the show. Look, this is the Privy Council, of course. There was Parliament as well. But it was mostly the same sort of people in Parliament. All these, look, Prince George of Denmark, he was the Lord High Admiral for a long time. Lord President, Duke of Beaumark, all these. I mean, it's just like the House of Lords now. This is how it was then. And much of English life, British life now, this is the sort of people who run it. It's a bit like the Crown officers here in Jersey. This is how the show operates, isn't it? These people who've got privileged positions by one means or another. And this is what I'm digging through. And this is a fascinating time. Obviously, this was the Protestant and the Catholic battle going on there. We just got rid of James. I think he's gone 1690. And of course, there's wars, potential wars. There's distant Jacobins, Jacobites, whatever we're calling them, Jacobites trying to get Bonnie Prince Charlie back, or James as it was then. James was threatening to invade at any one moment. And so there was locking people up, left, right and centre. But against all the background of running an empire. And it's amazing how much empire there was to run, and it's fascinating. And of course, this is the key to it all. Look, as always, the treasury. And this is what makes it all tick. It's collecting money out of people, duties, taxes, impositions, as they've revived the word impositions for Jersey. But all over the world they had to collect these things, and they'd send out these little boats. Here are up Virginia, Maryland, Barbados, 46 ships, 800 men. Barbados, 31 ships, 400 men. The Leeward Islands, I mean, it's amazing how little places feature them. Of course, they were full of slave labour, and they were producing things, sugar, tobacco, whatever they were producing. And this was the key to the empire, and it had to be run. I mean, British history is amazing. A tiny little place like Britain and the influence it had in the world. And little places like the Channel Islands are part of that. They're amazing. But of course, all this structure, all this bureaucracy about claiming land, running it commercially, generating wealth, it's the same business that the Channel Islands are in today. It's about providing a haven where the money can be hidden away, and it was doing that then. As the empire grew, so the importance of the Channel Islands and the other places as well. Gibraltar, once that got going a few years later, it was always a free port, and that was why. What else? You couldn't grow potatoes on Gibraltar, could you? What could it do? What could it be? It was a strategic military position. So how do you keep the people there? You give them special privileges. You make them a free port. They can import stuff, and they can make a reasonable living. But of course, they've got to maintain the British flag, fly the British flag, maintain their loyalty to the Britain, and the gateway to the Mediterranean. Very strategic, and you need that. If you're trying to trade with the world, you're trying to conquer the world, you need places like that, and you need places like the Channel Islands because they're strategic as well. So there's another aspect of the old empire, Britain building the empire, a tiny little place like Britain. It is an extraordinary history, but it's built upon typical colonial violence. Now, this is the Leeward Islands, and the plan is here, the bureaucracy is sending out 2 engineers, or any couple of engineers, and 2 miners, and I think they mean people to dig holes in the ground, not children, miners, and stores of war. Look at this lot. Bullets, shot, for demi-culverin, Lakers, guns already there, proportions. So obviously building some sort of fortress, I would think, barrels of powder, 100 barrels, 50 barrels of powder for small arms. See, different powder. You don't put the same stuff in the different guns. It might blow your hand off. Match, firelocks, pounds of bullet, cutlasses, bayonets. This is what went out with the empire. As you put out, you weren't, and you had the locals. If there were any locals in the Leeward Islands, they'd have come up against a musket or something if they didn't do as they were told. This was how the empire was won. And we think it's wonderful, and it is, in a sense, it is wonderful. But we have to bear this in mind. This is what it was all about, imposing ourselves on jurisdictions, or maybe not even jurisdictions, countries where people lived simple lives all over the world, whether it was the Caribbean, the Caribs, the people who live there, South America, North America, anywhere you care to mention where the British have been, they've been dominating them by force. This is how you make an empire. Some tragic, awful things we've done. But we still hoist the flag to them now. We still raise the flag. And we pretend to be part of the Commonwealth, as though it's got there's some commonality about it. The commonality is that Britain tried to dominate the world. Here's a Channel Island, Jersey incident here with John the Galley. He's been sent to prison. In fact, he's under death sentence by the Jersey Royal Court. And he had the misfortune, as far as I can make out, he was out on parade with the militia, I think. He said about in July, was being a train band under his colours. And they had a row with Edward de la Cloche or somebody. And they something to do with the colours and the drum. Benjamin Chevalier, and they had a row. Anyway, John le Galley, he obviously had his musket loaded, and it went off. And it killed this young lady named Osoph. She happened to be standing watching the soldiers all dressed up in their nice pretty uniforms, I suppose. Perhaps she had a boyfriend there or something, I don't know. Anyway, she got killed. So it was an accidental killing, but he was sentenced to death, poor old John le Galley. Hester Osoph, her name was. The Royal Court sentenced her to death. So he's in jail. So he petitions the Privy Council. And this is fair. I mean, the petitions from the Channel Islands, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them over the years, mostly about petty inheritance or wheat rents, disputes with the seigneurs, all this stuff. But this poor chap, he's killed somebody by mistake, and poor old Hester, she's dead. So the King in Council grants him a pardon, and he's released from jail. So again, this system, it had some aspects of justice about it, but it was very haphazard. It wasn't as of right. You had to plead. You had to get on your knees and plead. And if they were feeling happy that day, they'd give you a pardon. And this is how they would dish it out. And for that day, John le Galley, what did he do? Did he go on to be rich and famous, I wonder? I don't know. Now, this is a little thing about the Salisbury Ketch. They've forgotten to put her on a list. So all of a sudden, they've suddenly realised they haven't got enough men. Look, they've got a complement of 5 men to sail her. Now, she's only 30 tons, like an overgrown rowing boat, really. Like the stuff you'd see down at St Albans Harbour, really. But they want some more crew. I don't know what she's up to. She's going to Virginia or somewhere to trade. So they're going to have to take some men off of other ships, because they're very restrictive on the men they can take. They don't want men leaking out of Britain, because they might want them to serve on warships or serve in the army. So they have to get permission. They want all the men they can get to serve in the forces. So even that tiny little boat like that all has to be licensed. You've got to think you do things. You don't just sail out of harbour. You don't just sail off to Virginia or New England or anywhere where this one's going. You don't just do that. You've got to get all sorts of permits. And of course, now with the Protestant Catholic campaign going on, anybody who's coming and going, they're suspicious of. They are. There's another one, a ketch. I mean, to me, this is wonderful. Now, this is a typical incident here. I don't know who this is John Vanbrugh and his wife Elizabeth Vanbrugh. John Vanbrugh was stopped at Calais for some reason. Obviously, they thought he was communicating with the French or the Bonnie Prince Charlie factor, King James, possibly. So he's been in prison for 2 years. He was passing from Ireland to France. Well, Ireland was a hotbed of Catholic supporters of the Pretender, so that's a dangerous thing. And he's got a funny name, Vanbrugh. Sounds like he's up to mischief, doesn't he? So he's in prison, and she wants him out. She wants to let him. So they've organised an exchange. They're going to swap him for another, bit like a game of chess, isn't it? They swap him for another prisoner somewhere else, and that's agreed to. That's sort of an act of humanity. You keep him locked up, then you have an act of humanity, and everybody thinks you're wonderful. See, this is the sort of problem you had. Now, this is Bermuda. The governor there, Mr. Robinson, they'd sent the customs officer over, but he wouldn't let them in. He didn't want the customs officer in. Now, that's exactly what happened in Jersey and Guernsey. They sent customs officers to these islands, but they wouldn't let them in. They fought them, sank their boats, did everything difficult to make it difficult for them. And this has happened all over the empire. They had the same problem all over the empire. They wanted to collect their duties, and obviously it's what finally brought down the great break with America, 1775. Americans wanted their independence. They'd had enough of all this nonsense. They wanted to run their own show. So this is what it's all about. There's constant friction, you see, between the people and the government. For some reason, governments always seem to be out of step. There's always people like all those lords that started off the first picture. They've got incredible power and wealth, and that's so it is today. We're getting this minority of growing wealth, and it's getting itself distanced from the general public, the people, and that's friction. And as always, like America, Great American Revolution, the French Revolution, even the little Jersey Revolution in 1769, people say, I've had enough of this, and they try to get rid of their rotten government. See, now this is my town, referring to here. The trade of the port of Bristol is where I come from. And it's the Virginia, the tobacco trade, basically. It's starting. This is when it really got going. Now, I've tried to read the customs records for Bristol for this period, and it's just wriggly lines. I don't know how anybody can read them. But this writing, look at it, 1690. Absolutely clear. It's like somebody at school learning how to write, isn't it? Perfectly right. And it's the English they use is perfectly understandable. It's very ordinary, matter of fact. There's nothing difficult about it. You can read it just like it was written today. And these are the original documents. I mean, for me, this is wonderful. I just love, I could sit here for hours, as I do, reading things like this, just discovering what used to go on in the past and how does it relate to what goes on today. Here it's all about tiny little boats. I mean, they are tiny, lots of these boats. They are, amazing. The guys had no fear of going across the Atlantic or down to the East Indies, wherever they were going, in tiny little boats, relatively tiny. Well, here's a little incident. Look, there's about a complaint coming from Jersey, gone to a petition of His Majesty's most dutiful subjects and deputies of the estates of the island of Jersey, complaining of the grievous oppressions, as well as disorders, cruelties, inhumanities the inhabitants of the island lie under by the officers and soldiers quartered there. You see, they got troops as a garrison. Jersey's a garrison. And there was always that big thing at that fort up on the hill there, and the one out in the bay, and the one at Gorey there. Of course, they were intended to have troops in them. And they were under lockdown all the time, the troops. They used to get bored out their brains and go out and do a bit of pillaging around the village. And of course, they had to be boarded somewhere as well. If they didn't have room for them in the castles, they had to find accommodation for them. And they made themselves very unpleasant. And they'd go out and get drunk and beat people up, or worse. And there they are as a petition. The population's fed up. So who do they complain to? Where can you complain? You have to complain to the Privy Council in London. It's no good complaining to the Royal Court here. Part of the problem is, of course, they have no jurisdiction over the army most of the time. They do lock them up occasionally, but this is the history. I love all this. I love the history, to know how it is. Why is it? Why have we got so many forts in Jersey? Why? Who are they protecting? Who are they? Are they saving the Jersey people from French, or are they saving the Jersey people from themselves? I've never been quite sure. Here you are, look, it wasn't only Jersey it was happening. Many murders, robberies, on the highway, and burglaries, breaking of dwelling houses have been committed. Lewd, disorderly and wicked persons who betake themselves to commit such murders, robberies and burglaries have been at time to go away. They've got a huge long list of these people here, look. All these people have been rampaging around Britain. Look, they got John Smith, Eli Smith, Charles Rawlinson, otherwise known as Lloyd, Edward Poor, Anthony St. Ledger, Elias Carroll. I mean, dozens of them. They got the names of them all. To be such and committed for such offences. So a fairly wild time was had by all. I mean, this was life in 1690s. But there's a sort of look through several centuries. It all has a rather appeal to it. So this is what I do. That's what I'm saying to you. You don't have to be bored. There's loads of stuff there. History, I love it. And I love Channel Islands history. People say, oh, is that... He's moaning again. I love it all. I want to know about it. But it's not all one wonderful fairy story. There's an awful lot of dreadful things that have happened in these islands. And we tend not to acknowledge them. There's some wonderful things have happened here. But there's an awful lot of things which, for some reason, bad things happen elsewhere. But they happened here as well. Mrs. Berricon. No, Justice of the Peace. Anyway, I don't know where that particular was. Now here's another little Jersey appeal. Look, proprietor of mills. Still, water mills and windmills. This Edward de Carteret, in right of his wife, proprietor of, I don't know what it says there, so look, of a mill at Frickay. So it looks like. Elias de Marek, proprietor of a mill at Auger, and several other proprietors of mills in the island of Jersey, together with their proctor, entered an appeal against the decision of the Royal Court in favour of Miss Jane Carteret, widow of Mr. George Lacloche, gent, guardian of her children. I don't know what, lots of these cases, they've always got guardians of their children. I don't know what it is. For the rebuilding of certain windmill upon Mountville or thereabouts, which they are bound to prosecute. So really straightforward domestic stuff which should have been sorted out. But because these are important people, these are ruling type people in Jersey context, all their appeals finish up in the Privy Council. They can afford to take them. They can afford to go to London and make representations. And this is how Jersey was run for ages and ages. Any disputes, they finish up at the Privy Council, which of course, like now, people couldn't afford to go to the Privy Council. They couldn't afford the boat passage, never mind appearing before the lordships, staying in London. We can't afford lawyers. Lots of people can't afford to employ a lawyer. They have to rely upon legal. It's always been like that. And if you have a dispute like this, I mean, these people own mills, so they presumably are fairly, because obviously milling the grain for somebody was quite a lucrative activity, because there's obviously charges to be made and there'll be taxes to be paid, and this is all the giant. And you notice all those people, there's a couple of families, Carteret and de Marek, there's a couple of particular families there are very prominent, and that's how Jersey history always has been. See, we're getting to the nitty-gritty now as far as places like Jersey, Guernsey, and other little dots around the world. There's a naval vessel here. Look, he's the Eagle, I think it's called, and it's captured a vessel, and it's got 82 butts of brandy and 27 hogsheads of wine between decks on the Golden Nagle, they call it the Nagle, or hook. And of course, this is the stuff that smuggling was all about, wasn't it? It was part of it, it wasn't the only thing. But that's the sort of stuff. And it was sent into Plymouth, and now, of course, they're trying to account for it. They're trying to find out where it's gone and who can have the proceeds. And obviously, the king and his cohorts, they want their fair share. Well, you might find all this very boring, but here's one little item, and it's by Mr. Francis Smartfoot, and he's got a petition here to the Privy Council. He's got a petition because he wants to patent his 2 new inventions. One is for a sea crab, and the other is for a pair of lungs for a man breathing underwater as he swims. Now that's pretty adventurous in 1690. Now, any little boy and some girls would be very curious to know what Mr. Smartfoot was up to in 1690, wouldn't they? I mean, did he invent a sea crab? What do you think he was? Why would he want to be a sea crab? I mean, I don't know. Anyway, I think we should find out. So there you are, you see. That's all I have to say about history for today.